This video was brought to you by Gamersgate.com. Download games anytime, anywhere. Skip it up and that up. It's so funny when you look at forums and how many people just jump into the hype train of the most hype games of the year. And all these guys with Battlefield 4 were like, guys, I have a GTX 670 and 64 gigabytes of RAM and an Intel Core i7 4770K. Is that going to be enough to run Battlefield 3 at 30 frames per second on Ultra? I really hope so. I really don't want to have to get two GTX 780s and SLI to get 60 frames a second. I don't know if I can afford that, guys. Well, don't get your suspenders in a bunch there, ass captain. Battlefield 4, or DICE, I mean to say, finally released the Battlefield 4 requirements and recommended specs, and they're nowhere near as bad as a lot of people were thinking they were going to be or hyping them up to be. So here we go. So here are the recommended and required specs for your PC if you want to run Battlefield 4. An Intel quad-core or 6-core AMD. I wonder if that would include my AMD 1045T I used to own. I still love that processor. One of the best bangs I had for the buck. Those processors are recommended. So once again, an Intel quad-core or 6-core AMD processor is recommended. With an Intel, this is surprising still, with an Intel Core 2 Duo or an Athlon X2, we're going back to like 2007 here, the minimum requirements for CPUs. An NVIDIA GTX 660, which isn't bad, that's a fairly affordable video card, or a Radeon 7870, which is somewhat equivalent to what's inside the PS4, is the recommended graphics card. But this made me shit myself a little bit. But DICE says the game will also run on a GeForce 8800 GT. I gotta talk about that a second, man. At least personally to me, and if you guys have a card that you think is better, I'm interested to hear it. I got an 8800 GT back in very late 2007, maybe early 2008. That card has to be one of the best cards NVIDIA ever made for the dollar, because it was like somewhat upper mid-range card of 2007, 2008, and it could still run games at HD resolutions, not 1080p in most cases, but 720p at like medium settings still to this day. That card is still relevant to this day, and it's all pretty much 5 years old. That's proof right there, man. Everyone thinks with PCs, especially guys who aren't into PC gaming, I've talked about this before, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, you don't need to upgrade your hardware every year. But NVIDIA, the 8800 series has to be one of the best series you ever made, especially the 8800 GT. It's unreal that card is still kicking and is still a minimum recommended requirement for 2013 games, and it's over 5 years old. Anyway, moving on. 4 gigabytes of RAM for your rig is the minimum, but 8 gigabytes is recommended. 3 gigabytes of graphics memory is also recommended, which I'm very glad now. I have NVIDIA GeForce GTX 670 for the Win Edition by EVGA that has 4 gigabytes of video RAM. I was going to upgrade to a 780. It just isn't necessary. I'm going to wait till the 800 series of cards. That 670 I have, man, it just kills everything that I throw at it. So, and especially now seeing these specs, I'm glad I kept it. As for operating systems, DICE recommends Windows 8 64-bit, but will function on Windows Vista Service Pack 2 32-bit. That's also kind of surprising, too. I thought Vista was completely irrelevant at this point because it was a horrible operating system. I hate Vista. Between Vista and Millennium Edition, they're just both horrible operating systems, but Vista was a joke, man. God, I was fixing PCs back then, too. What a nightmare that was to work on. Battlefield 4 will also require 30 gigabytes of free hard drive space, which I kind of expected. So there you go. The specs aren't that bad. You're not going to need to, go out and spend $1,000 just to run Battlefield 4 at decent settings and at a high resolution and get a good frame rate, as long as it's optimized well. Just because they don't have insane required specs here doesn't mean the game is going to be optimized well. but I know DICE knows what they're doing, so I'm sure that the Frostbite 3 engine is going to be very well optimized for all the platforms that it is on. Anyway, folks, make sure to rate, comment, favorite, and subscribe, and as always, thank you for supporting Review Tech USA. Have a good one.